can download this at any time and follow along with us if you want, or download it later. It's something you can keep by the machine, laminate, and have people sign if you have a formal maintenance program. So this resource is available for you online and will be after this webinar. As well, we're going to record this and we'll post this webinar up on our online service center. We have a link called resources, and underneath that is all of the webinar content that we've stored so far, so you can get that there. Just a note that none of us are professional presenters, so if we make a mistake or mess up, we are live, and we'll just keep going, okay? So maybe you won't hold it against us. All right. If you do have questions, with this particular webinar, I'm not set up to take questions and answers afterwards. However, please email me at tfalk@krbmachinery.com with any specific questions after the webinar, and I will be sure to get you an answer by the end of the week, okay? Fair enough. And then one more reminder that, again, this will be online on our online service center after. So I'll stop yabbering on, and we're going to start with Ed Gaynor, who's going to cover our shear. One more thing I do want to note, we're going to cover the mini line and the H3000 shear today. However, the preventative maintenance is exactly the same for the H4100 and those Shearline conveyors. So whatever we talk about today is also relevant for our standard shear line. So I'm going to stop talking now, and we're going to let Ed take it over. I'm going to flip the camera around here, so bear with me. And here we go. Ed, take it away.
Here we're going over daily maintenance, and the first thing you should do is inspect your shear blades. You want to check for chips or cracks.
Get in there, Ed. Ed and I are getting closer than we'd like to right now, but wanted to show everybody back at home what's going on. Okay.
And then out front, this is your hold down. You want to grease that daily. 4 grease points here.
And how many pumps of grease should you typically put in that, Ed?
2 or 3 in each.
Okay, perfect.
And while you're up front, you ought to grease the slide and the shear.
And it's just those 2 grease.
And there's some over here, down here. There. And then there's 4 in the back.
So we got 4 across the back, 2 on the other side, 1 on each side.
Yes.
And 3 on each side of the front. So 6 total in the front. Okay.
Then you want to look over the conveyor, make sure there's nothing laying here before you start running.
Okay.
And just double check all your guarding over your rollers. They're all in place, covering all your belts. And your one here in front. And then you want to go over and check all your safety switches.
So there's one here on the guard.
Yeah, make sure that guard's closed, that's engaged.
Can you show me the plunger and how that engages? What you should check for?
Make sure that goes in and out real easy.
Got
it. And just double check all your emergency stops. There's one, and you also have one on the other side.
Okay. And what do you do to check those? Push them in and
Push them in
make sure they engage.
and pull them out before to start it. And just go over and make sure all your seal tights, all your wiring's not damaged. And you have 2 sensors here in the back. You want to make sure all those are working properly.
How do you check those?
Light up when you have the power on.
Okay. So they're to be lit if they're working properly.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
If you see anything damaged or bolts falling out or anything, you should replace all that. Make sure all your safety covers are still on.
Check for loose hose fittings. Okay.
And just good idea to check the direction of the rollers when you're pushing forward on the console, that they're rolling forward and reverse.
So from the console, you're going to use the joysticks to make sure everything's moving correctly.
Yes.
Okay. All right, then you go into weekly maintenance. Is that right?
Yeah, bi-weekly, you'll grease these double block bearings on the rollers. There's one on each side of the roller. The other ones are under the covers.
You would take this guard off, grease the other side.
Yes.
Okay.
And then monthly maintenance. It's here on the power unit. You want to check your hydraulic oil level. Make sure that's full.
And it's hard to see now, but can you point to where the level is now?
We usually try to keep it right below this black line.
Okay.
And it would be a good idea to check your mounting bolts on your motor for your conveyor. There'll be four, one in each corner. Probably access them better if you take the front cover off.
And then you can check the bolts here. Okay, on the motor mount.
Yeah, and while you have those covers off, it'd be a good idea to check the belt tensioners and belts underneath the covers.
Okay. What about yearly maintenance?
I would change the oil in the hydraulic tank.
How do you typically do that?
Well, the easiest way is to take this off. Take all these bolts out. Put a hose down in there, attached to a pump, and just suck it out.
And then have your local oil provider refill it for you.
Yeah. And then you would also want to change your filter, which is underneath this cover. Remove these four bolts. That's underneath.
And that's annually as well.
Yeah.
And we can get that here at KRB. You can actually buy the parts online. Is that it then?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, Ed. Ed's taking us through the shear. Now Courtney Huber is going to take over and she's going to show us some maintenance on the conveyors. She's going to cover daily maintenance on both the measuring and entry conveyors. Take it away, Courtney.
All right, so I'm gonna take you guys up here to the front. This is where our safety filters and stuff normally are. You always want to make and check and look for the bolts and the guards. Make sure all your guards are on and working. Then right up here, we have a safety gate latch. And then, so imagine the rollers are running and everything, the bar's on there. If there's any problem or anything gets stuck, you're gonna want to take this gate up here and you just want to push it up.
No,
And then,
flip that arm up, right, Courtney?
yep. As soon as you flip that arm up, all these rollers should stop.
Okay.
To clear anything out of the way, you want to make sure this isn't cracked and it still rolls real nice. And then up here you have an electrical box. You always want to look at all the wiring inside, make sure nothing's damaged or broken.
We're hanging loose, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna take you guys down to see health insurance if you have on both vehicles and normally for these health insurance, you're just gonna take a 3/16 and a 7/16 wrench. take it up here. Pop that in there. And you're gonna tension it to the belt. You wanna make sure there's no tension on the belts. So when they roll, they'll roll right.
How much, like, typically is there do you touch that with your thumb or something? How do you know how tight to get it?
Normally we make it so it's about right there. And
Okay.
that should be pretty tight on the top and the bottom.
So there should be no slack whatsoever.
Yes, yeah, no
Okay.
slack at all.
All right.
And then, like I said, we have tensioners on both the gauge table and the entries.
Okay.
I'm gonna take you over here to the gauge table to show you all the hydraulics and stuff. Over here we have the fully lubricated. You just want to make sure that this is always filled with hydraulic oil. Right here is the max fill line. You can see.
Okay.
You want to make sure nothing's leaking. You can't feel no air blowing when it's hooked up to air. You want to make sure all these lines are still intact.
Okay.
And then for stops and stuff, you're just going to want to make sure that the cylinders are still okay. All the wiring or the air hoses going in it are still okay. You're going to want to make sure this goes straight up and it's not bent or anything. And then you're going to make sure from the console, you're going to press forward and backwards for the rollers, just to make sure they still roll. Make sure nothing's in the way of those.
Okay.
And then with the arms, when you go to put them up, make sure nothing's behind it or in front of it, because it'll get caught. And
So you're talking about the
Possibly something.
discharge arms here, these
Yes.
red ones.
yes, these red arms.
And if you have a dual-sided discharge arm, you want to check both sides, of course.
Yes, absolutely. You want to
Okay.
check the bolts holding them on. You want to check and make sure the splits are bolted together. You want to try and make sure that these hydraulic lines here aren't leaking anything, or that they're still nice and tight to the brackets. Take you down to this motor here. Normally, you're going to want to clean this out pretty often just to make sure there's no dust or anything in it. So you'll take an air line from a compressor and you're just going to take a nozzle and you're just going to blow through it just to make sure all the dust and stuff clears away from it.
Okay. All right.
I think that's everything for me.
Great. Okay, cool. Thanks, Courtney. All right, now we're going to have Jake Fenwick. He's going to go over the bi-weekly maintenance and bi-yearly maintenance. Some of this stuff might be repeat that Courtney did, but Jake has his own take on it. So go ahead, Jake.
Okay, so if we go up here to the motors, we're going to start at the motors. You want to make sure that on these motors, we have these fan covers here. We want to make sure that they're not full of rebar scale. You want to make sure they're clear of any debris, because if this is full of debris and stuff, it will not cool the motors properly, which will cause you problems. And when you're down here checking the fan housing, you want to make sure all your bolts, the housing's not cracked and they're all tight. Yeah. And then, like they said on the and same thing on what Courtney, just to touch on what Courtney said with the rollers, make sure all your belts are tight. Take these covers off. Make sure you check all your belts. Make sure they're all good and tight. And then
Do you want to show us how to take the cover off? Or here's an example of a cover that's off. Right here.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
you want to make sure, again, make sure all your airlines aren't damaged in any way. Make sure they're all, not leaking air, not pinched or damaged.
Can you go into more detail about then showing the water and the air
Yeah,
filter supply and
that's
how
right.
you can empty that?
So this is our air oil regulator, and
Yep.
this is the air supply here.
Courtney
want-
talked about the oil side, but yeah, tell us about the water side,
With
Jake.
the air, you want to just make sure that there's no water inside of here. If there is, drain it. Make sure this is dry. Then you just put it back on. on it. It will lock on somehow.
It's hard to do with one hand.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
He's
And then with the oiler, it should drip. It should drip every 4 discharges. So make sure that's set correctly and make sure the pressures are set right.
okay.
The smaller regulator should be set about 20 psi,
And right now we have it off.
We
So
have
it's
them turned off right
registering
now.
0.
and
But normal running is 20 psi.
for the small regulator.
Okay.
Then the larger regulator, when it's set at 80 psi.
80 psi. Okay. And that's your air in. And the reason why you have oil in there is to keep it a little bit lubricated so it doesn't build up as much condensation in the lines to freeze. Okay. All right. What about our bi-yearly maintenance, Jake? Greasing all that stuff. What do you do?
Well, with greasing everything for the arms, you'll see that we have these pillow block bearings,
Mm-hmm.
and there's these little grease fittings here, and you want to make sure that they're full of grease. Just like when you can see grease start coming out the edge of the bearing, that's full of grease.
Okay.
You want to do that on your discharge arms on the gauge table.
Okay.
And on the entry conveyor, we're going to do that to your preload, to your swing arms, and your letdown arms.
Can you show us that?
Yes.
Come around this way. I'll meet you. Careful.
So on these red arms here, so
This is our preload arm on the entry conveyor.
you see these little grease fittings here. They're pre-greased from factory, but you want to make sure that these are full of grease. That they are not. If they're not full of grease, the arms will bind up.
Okay. Okay. Got load frame, measuring table, discharge arms. You showed those.
I showed those.
Okay.
I think that's it.
All right. What about the bar hold down?
We don't have.
Okay, we're not actually showing
We
that
don't
on
have
this
that.
measuring
We don't
table.
have
So some measuring tables will actually have a hold down at the end that you should grease as well. This conveyor that we're building right now doesn't have that. So, okay. So that's pretty much it, guys. We're gonna go ahead and sign off now. I want to thank everybody who's signed in to register for this webinar. Appreciate you putting up with the live type performance of this event and my poor camera work. So for the team here in the Shearline department and myself, I just want to thank you very much for participating. And Courtney, Ed, Jake, if I can get you in the frame, it would be fantastic. But thank you very much for your participation. And guys, again, if you have any questions, go ahead and email me, tfalk@krbmachinery.com. If you have specific questions, if I can't answer them, I will make sure I get them to somebody who can. So thanks again for your participation, and we'll see you next time.